we'll be figuring out patterns that make hot reloading and animation work together smoothly. So you could do something like change the speed of the animation with hot reloading, or also, play and pause the animation at will. This has been an outstanding challenge for a while, but I finally figured out this pattern that I think is generic in supporting animations that work well with hot reloading. Alright, I'm on this mission to figure out coding patterns that work well with hot reloading. And one of the challenges that I haven't quite figured out is animation loops. So if you search VizHub for globe, there's this spinning globe example that I made a video about. And it works, but I'm not quite happy about the hot reloading support with this. So let's try to figure that out. The first thing I'll do is, first of all, make it support hot reloading by deleting index.html, and that breaks it. Index.js I will also delete. That contains the implementation of state and set state that is now built into VizHub. And I'll rename viz.js to index.js. And now that's supposed to export main. Oh, look at that! Our new errors are working. CSV parse is never used. Alright, good call. Okay, wow, it works. Okay, that's how you can make it compatible with the VizHub version 3 runtime, which does support hot reloading. But let's see how well this currently works, really, with hot reloading. Now, I think it should continue to animate even if I change the stroke color of something. Okay, great. That kind of worked pretty well. And if I change the stroke width on this, I'm going to use a fraction so I can control it more precisely. And then we can drag it, and it does work pretty well with hot reloading. Okay, good. That's good. But what about changing the parameters of the animation itself? Like, let's say I wanted to change how fast it rotates. That would be this piece here. If I want to make it rotate faster, well, I'll change this to a fraction. But then if I make it like 9 out of 10 and hit save, with Control S or Shift Enter, it should ideally start spinning faster, but it does not. If I refresh the whole page, now it is spinning faster. So the whole problem with this pattern is that we only kick off the animation loop if rotation is undefined, and rotation comes from the state. Now, I'm not sure the total best solution here, but the criteria I'm looking for is that I should be able to change something like the speed of the rotation, and it should work with hot reloading. Also, ideally, I could say something like enable animation is true, and then if I set that to false and rerun it, it should stop and stay, where it was rotated to. Well, one thing that we do have now is a cleanup function, and this is inspired by React, use effect in React. So this main function, you can actually return a function called cleanup, and I'll say cleanup is a function that just says console.log cleaning up ... Oh, but this is running like every single time. So maybe that's not the best, considering that we are changing the state every time we rotate the globe. Maybe the thing to do is to put this animate function on the state itself. See, I don't have a ready-made solution for this, so if anyone has ideas, let me know. Let me sort of go back to the drawing board. I'm just going to comment all this out and see if I save this, it continues to spin. That's not cool, because this loop is totally disconnected from the hot reloading. So I'll have to do a hard refresh. Now it does not spin. How about something like if enable animation, then we maybe call request animation frame and pass in a new function which we can call animate in here. And I'm keeping this to false for now because I don't want to crash everything. But the idea is that we can leverage the fact that main is getting called every time we change the state, and that can be sort of a natural part of our animation loop. So we don't want to request animation frame from inside of animate. And you know, just to keep it simpler in a way, I'm going to define that as an inline function. Okay, this to me feels actually pretty good. I think it will satisfy our requirements. Let's think it through before we run it. If this runs and enable animation is false, it's not going to do anything. So actually, it should be safe to run it. However, we are missing the piece that sets the initial rotation on the state, which is good. I mean, I kind of like that. So, you know, I think I will actually bring back that piece. And this will just set the initial rotation. And because it will trigger another execution, we can return here. Okay, now we get the initial rotation. That's good. And then, if animation is set to true, then when it renders, we call request animation frame, which introduces a slight delay. And then after that slight delay, which is 1/60th of a second typically, we call set state and update the rotation. So let's try this out. If I set this to true, it animates. And then can I change the speed? Yes, I can. Oh my gosh. This is exactly what I wanted to do. Yeah, if I set it to 1/10, it's going pretty slow. And if I say enable animation is false, it should, in theory, stop. And it does. Okay, great. That's great. Okay. So set that to true. Somehow earlier it seemed a little bit laggy. If I set it to 0 here, it should stop. I hope there's not like a leak of some sort. See, after having changed it a bunch of times, it doesn't seem nearly as fast. And if I use the widget to change it a bunch of times, it seems actually super slow. Am I missing something here? Yeah, there's definitely more of a lag now. See how slow that's going? That's like ridiculous. There's something weird going on. But if I set this to false and rerun it, it actually took some time to stop. And then if I set it to true, now it's very smooth. Okay, I have a feeling there's some kind of a leak going on here. Like maybe every time it hot reloads, there's a new series of loops getting triggered or something. Here's my theory. When a hot reload is triggered, that triggering may happen in the time span after we call request animation, but before this function executes. And the effect of that is that when that happens, request animation frame is called again, and so we have two simultaneously pending requests for request animation frame. And so each animation frame, let's say we do the hot reloading once in that in-between time frame, then every cycle of the request animation frame, there would be two invocations of this function, which is not right. So maybe the thing to do is to leverage the cleanup function to cancel the animation frame. Yeah, there's a method called cancel animation frame. And we can call that with a request ID, which is returned by request animation frame. Okay, yeah, it says here that the return value from request animation frame is an ID. Okay, let's try that. Let's say let animation frame ID. What do they call it over here? Request ID. So I'll call it animation frame request ID. And that will be what's returned by request animation frame. And then, well, I wonder if it can be undefined, like what happens if we call cancel animation frame. Well, let's just only call cancel if we have it as defined. So it's initialized as undefined. It will be defined at the time we request the animation frame. And then 16 milliseconds after that point in time, this function will run. And so we want to get the case where if there's a hot reload in that time frame, then we want to cancel that. However, if it gets executed, we don't need to cancel it. So I'll say it's undefined. And I think canceling a fulfilled animation frame is a no-op anyway, but let's just sort of be on the safe side. And then we can return this cleanup function, which will do something like if animation frame request ID is not undefined, then cancel. Oh, nice. Look at that autocomplete. Cancel animation frame. Animation frame request ID. Okay, so now we're cleaning it up. Let me see if I can tweak the speed now and have it behave correctly with no lag. All right, that feels way better. Way better. I think we solved the problem. Yo, that's amazing. Now we can do something like, pivot the globe up and down like this. What does this value do? Oh, tilt it side to side. Yeah, this is sweet. This is sweet. Okay, we actually solved the core problem there, which is fantastic. Okay, great. That's how you can really solve the problem of animation with request animation frame in such a way that it works well, really well, with hot reloading. Here's a recap of what we did and how this works. Instead of doing this, which I'll leave as a reference for, let's say this does not work well with hot reloading. We got rid of this code and introduced this code here, starting with enable animation. This is one of our criteria. We should be able to start and stop the animation at will, and that works with hot reloading. False, true. We can play and pause it with hot reloading. And then we have this request animation frame ID. And sorry about this warning. That's a bug. That gets initialized as undefined. Scratch that. This thing starts off as undefined, but if animation is enabled, at the time we request the animation frame, we store the returned value from that as animation frame request ID. And so the way animation frames work is that we call request animation frame. That kicks off a request to the browser to say, yo, Mr. Browser, can you please call this function in about, at most 16 milliseconds, or whenever you're ready to repaint at 60 frames a second optimally. See, if you didn't know this, computer displays have what's called a refresh rate, and request animation frame is a way to hook into that refresh rate. And I think by default, or most commonly, that refresh rate is 60 frames a second. That's when you get buttery smooth animation. Maybe on mobile it's less, 30 or something. But request animation frame, if you're in a request animation frame loop, the time between those repaints is 1/60th of a second, which is roughly 16 milliseconds. So we were running into a problem where the hot reload was triggering in between the time when we requested the animation frame and the time when the animation frame was fulfilled. And so what was happening is the hot reloaded code was making another request before the previous request got fulfilled. And then, because we weren't canceling it, the previous request and the new request were getting fulfilled at the same time. And then every time we hot reloaded, we would pile onto that stack of concurrent requests, and it was just slowing things down. So we solved that problem by storing this animation frame request ID, setting it to be undefined when the request gets fulfilled. And I don't know if that's strictly necessary, but that lets us check in the cleanup function. If it is not undefined, we know that there's a pending request. I'll just add a comment. If this is defined, there is a pending request for an animation frame that should be canceled. And if it is defined, then we call scratch that. And if it is defined, then we call cancel animation frame, canceling that request. And this setup allows us to, play and pause it by setting this Boolean. See, when I set it to false and hot reload, it stops where it is. It doesn't reset, which is cool. And then I can do something like change the speed of the rotation using these interactive widgets, or also change the, the pitch and yaw of the globe. So yeah, that's how you can support animations with hot reloading. I think this is pretty cool. I look forward to unlocking all sorts of different things, like you could do simulations with this pattern where you can tweak the variables of the simulation in real time, maybe with D3 Force. That's going to be super cool.